Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we are joined by Agrii's Jamie Lyttle, agronomist, and Greg Taylor, area business manager and agronomist. The focus today is tackling a real challenge, blackgrass, and how from identifying the problem, field-scale trials were able to find real solutions. So let's find out more from the agronomist on that farm as to how possible solutions were identified to help manage this challenging problem. So Jamie, could you start us off with telling us the story of the Tusmore trial site?
Yeah, very much a case of when we were walking some spring bean crops a few years ago, we noticed that there was a huge element of blackgrass appearing within the row spacings of the drill of choice that we had used. And really, spring drilling and spring bean crops, and we're just a wee bit concerned that the level of blackgrass that was germinating within the rows following the drill that we had used. And it sort of led on to me really thinking, is this really right, and what can we actually do? And sort of an idea popped into my head, and sometimes when ideas pop into my head, they multiply up quite drastically, and a small idea became a very large trial.
Are farmers and other agronomists showing a real interest in what you're doing there?
Yeah, I would say it's growing in popularity, and following on 12 months from the first original trial that we did, I think I got a bit carried away with the trial that we're putting in the ground this year. We went from 4 drills last year to sort of 8 drills this year, and obviously we've got 6 different cultivation techniques and 3 different drilling timings with 3 different seed rates. This year's trial, I've sort of gone a bit mad is the only way to really describe it, and I've also got a 1 meter untreated chemical strip of a pre-em chemical. We've got to look at the sort of approach that we were taking on the farm, and looking at whether the drill that we had in choice that was bought on an FBT grant really was the right drill, and whether it was being used in the right situation. And I wanted to make sure that we were also looking at the lower end of the drills, and did we really need to go out and buy the brand new shiny drill and the shiny bit of kit, or was the old drill that was nearly written off and had no depreciation value just as good?
Yeah. And Jamie, just so that everybody can picture where the site is located, where is it located?
So it's located just off the M40 near Brackley. It's a very easy run. If you get off the M40, you're literally 5 minutes off the M40 and you're at the trial site.
And Greg, from your perspective, paint a picture as to the value, the reason why we need trial sites, demo sites like this, where farmers can go along and see differences, see what works, see what doesn't work so well.
Yeah. So the industry's changed. There's been a huge uplift in regenerative farming, wanting to be more kind to the soils, wanting to do less tillage, wanting to reduce costs, following grant aids. There's been a lot of changes, and sometimes in agriculture, I quite often say there's a lot of variables, and if you change one thing, fine, you can test that and see the outcome. But quite often we change so many things at once, we don't actually know the route we're going down, and things have to adapt and evolve with that system, and that's where things were getting a little bit out of control, and we were posing all these questions and really looking for the answers.
And if you're a grower who has blackgrass on your land and you're listening right now, what are the key questions that you would like answered? Jamie, what do you think are those key questions?
I suppose you've got to look really at the last 3-4 years and the weather pattern that we currently are experiencing. As agronomists, we would always, or have always historically said, you should really be looking at delayed drilling to sort of try and combat and reduce the level of blackgrass pre-drilling, and give you that opportunity for a dose of Roundup before drilling. And Greg and I have discussed it previously before, and I don't really feel that the delayed drilling is really the answer. We seem to be coming out of the winter with crops that are very much under stress, that are drilled very late, that really aren't really amounting to a huge amount. we've got to find a solution that we can, split the farm in a third, a third, and a third, and potentially look at cultivation systems to enable us to do a bit of earlier drilling. I feel that yes, delayed drilling is historically the right thing to do in terms of trying to reduce your blackgrass level. However, it really is putting a huge amount of pressure on a farm system in order to sort of get these crops through the winter. Last year, I think we had the highest level of rainfall we ever had through an autumn. There isn't the margins out there for farmers to have poor crops going into the spring. And I would feel, even as an agronomist crop walking in the last few weeks, there still is plenty of poor crops out there this spring that have been drilled very, very late in November because it was the only drilling window that we had last year.
Looking therefore at what you learnt last year, what were those key headline learns that showed up in the trial demo site?
Well, I would say if you move that on, Tony, and look at the trial that's currently in the ground, we've looked at sort of 6 different cultivation techniques, and we've looked at the likes of pre-em chemistry and what benefits that has. We've also looked at drilling as early as the 15th of September, and our latest drilling was the 22nd of November. What I would very much say is the earlier drilling plots are especially clean where we've used the reset button and we put the plough in the ground for the first year. Where we've done no cultivations whatsoever, and it's been drilled on the 15th September and on the sort of direct drilling area, the blackgrass levels are sort of getting out of control at the minute. I would anticipate it might be a case of a lawnmower job very, very soon. As we obviously move later into the trial and the later drilling timings, you are getting cleaner in terms of blackgrass numbers, even on the direct drilling side compared to when we were drilling in September. However, the crops are much farther behind, and it's really that challenge of you can have cleaner crops that later you go and drill, but you obviously have crops that are under pressure from day one.
Very interesting. You mentioned there about pressing the reset button by using the plough. And I wonder what others are thinking who are listening today in terms of reintroducing the plough.
If you assess the numbers of blackgrass in some of the other cultivation systems that we've used in the trial, that they're well into double digits and double figures. If you look at where we've used the plough and pressed the reset button, we're still in single figure levels of blackgrass that we're dealing with on a per meter squared basis. Where we have missed the strip and where we haven't done a peri-em chemistry application, it very much is a case of that blackgrass is probably getting into plus of 100 blackgrass plants a meter squared.
And of course, with that number of blackgrass plant counts right now in terms of seed return, that's a real problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a huge problem. Yeah, it's such a big impact on yield, and it's then trying to combat the issue in the subsequent years that we'll be dealing with it for the next 5 to 6 years at least.
Greg, it sounds to me that Jamie's got a lot going on here in terms of trying to answer so many questions. Greg, what do you think from last year were the key sort of trends, the key questions that were answered that farmers took away from the last season?
Yeah, so one of the standout things that we have culturally is delayed drilling. And as you get later in the season, the weight of blackgrass comes out of the ground because you've been able to flush it and spray it off. But as Jamie alluded to, we've then ended up with later crops and poorer crops, which can then yield less. So there's a bit of it's not always in your favour. But interestingly, last year, what we really found is that can you enforce a flush? Can you get that out the way quicker to then get into a successful crop with less blackgrass? And the history of this site was really about testing direct drills or strip tillage drills and incorporating them in a cultivation system to help flush that blackgrass out first. And what we really found was where you enforce the flush, you then enables you to then go drilling with minimum disturbance. Okay, we're not true direct drilling at that point because we've already been in with some sort of cultivation, even some of those being incredibly light, but we have forced the flush to then use the direct drill as a minimum disturbance machine at the point of drilling. And some of those plots were incredibly successful in having the least amount of blackgrass.
For more information on the Tusmore Farm demonstration site and other iFarm sites across the UK, visit www.agrii.co.uk/summer-ifarm-events. Thanks, Greg. And Jamie, what level of blackgrass do you have at Tusmore? What are you looking at in terms of weed pressure?
To give everyone a sort of an idea of the trial site and some of the numbers that we were dealing with, we were looking at sort of 650 blackgrass plants per metre squared as a farm average. If you look at what happened post-cultivations 2.5 weeks later, where we'd used cultivation equipment such as a top-down, we were enabling ourselves to bring up a big level of blackgrass. We sort of managed to get 315 blackgrass plants a metre squared to germinate post-using the top-down. If you roll that on and look at sort of where we did very minimal cultivations, or for example, using a carrier, it was sort of 114 blackgrass plants per metre squared, and where you looked at the likes of the direct drilling, we only had 46 blackgrass plants per metre squared that germinated, where we did no cultivations whatsoever. To look at a farm system and know that you're dealing with 650 blackgrass plants per metre squared, and in your where you've done no cultivations, you've only got sort of 40 blackgrass plants per metre squared germinating. That's a lot of blackgrass that's going to germinate once you put a drill in the ground and move more soil at point of drilling. I suppose last year's trial was very much a case of assessing with these drills, and probably the hypothesis was, if we move more soil on the day that we go drilling, do we effectively create a bigger flush of blackgrass within the crop rather than pre-drilling the crop? That rung very true that the whole way through the season, and definitely where we did more cultivations and got a bigger flush, we had much cleaner crops come harvest time.
And just specific to Tusmore Park Farm, as I understand, is the farm where you have this demo. What has that farm manager, what has that farm done differently already as a result of what has been learnt from this field scale trial?
Well, they press the reset button on a vast acreage. They would probably only plough 100 to 200 acres a year. I think they've ploughed 600 acres this year, and very much a case of let's press the reset button and start a process of where we do rotational ploughing.
And how are the fields looking right now across that area that's had that reset button?
They're clean. They're very clean. Yeah, I, as an agronomist, I'm very happy.
I can see you smiling.
Yeah, it really has turned the corner on blocks or outlying farms that we had that were so dirty. It was a question of whether we put them into an SFI option on a legume fallow or a different scheme. We pressed the reset button. It has worked this year, and we have wall-to-wall wheat, especially considering how wet it was last year.
What does this specific farm, what does this farm manager want to learn? What questions do they want answered this year in order to take what is now looking to be cleaner fields forward into the next drilling period?
The reason we've set the trial up again this year is very much a case of trying to replicate what we did last year and try to, just ensure that we didn't, have a fluke last year and that it was the process if we tried it again this year. This year we've also put an emphasis on chemistry, and we all know what happens when we as agronomists look at treated plots of different chemicals, that it's had this chemical or it's had that, and there's this level of blackgrass through it, but we never really get to see the untreated plots and untreated from different drills. So we said we'd have a look at chemistry as well, and look at row width spacings and see whether row width spacings has an impact on blackgrass levels.
What's the benefit for other farmers to be able to learn from a site like this that Jamie has set up with the farm there?
Well, I think keeping blackgrass under control, we're now in a position, like Jamie said, we've hit the reset button, done a vast amount of ploughing, but there's only so often you can really do that before you start. If you do it too often, you start bringing up last year's blackgrass, and it's all about having that zero seed return policy. You can't go direct drilling with a lot of blackgrass sit on the surface from the previous year. It's just going to get exposed at the point of drilling. It's going to get flushed into the crop, or it may, if it hasn't, it may even just come at its own pace throughout the growing season at any time through the autumn into winter or again in the spring, disturbed by rainfall or wind or birds or anything that, or just natural growth. The farm leading into this, off the back of the demise of oilseed rape, was really questioning break crops, which break crops to grow, and which ones you can actually make money out of. And we quite often use the phrase failing break crops. We have very little chemistry in some of the spring break crops. We have very little options to make money out of break crops. And some of the buyback contracts in winter linseed or winter oats are very, very attractive, but there's no cultural control of blackgrass in those crops. So in a very short space of time, we went from a farm that was what I'd call clean with a pinch of salt, just generally an underlying level, which in the right autumn, with the right drilling date, the right PM, in the right conditions, moisture, not too hot, etc., to make things work, you'd have beautifully clean crops. But you make one mistake and it just comes up and shows itself. And the seed return for blackgrass is exponential. We're in a situation where just 1 or 2 years trialing with alternative break crops was enough to suddenly ramp up the seed return of blackgrass, to then, unfortunately, in year 3, to come in with a strip till drill, and nothing against strip till drilling in its own theory, but just at that point of drilling, we disturbed all the blackgrass. And what we're really demonstrating here is not rocket science. It's just putting all the points of the sequence together and saying this is how, in a short space of time, you can completely blow things up. How can we manage this better? How can we change a drill and manage the system around it? Or how can we change the system but keep the same drill? Do we need to invest in drills that are £100,000 each and need grant funding to do that? Or do we just stick with what we've already got? How can we manage the soil better to be able to manage blackgrass culturally?
Jamie, if I was listening as a grower right now and facing blackgrass and issues such as this farmer's experienced, what would be your key advice right now in terms of what you've learned from what you've experimented with in the ground?
Everything was costed out in terms of a margin side of things, and I would say that on our highest yielding margin to sort of generate £1,832 margin, to then go from our worst margin, which was sort of £900. There's a huge margin fluctuation between doing it right and getting it wrong. And really, I would just encourage anyone to sort of come and have a look, and there'll be hopefully something in there that benefits you, and hopefully something that you can take away and change.
To pull this podcast together, well, how can farmers visit this site and see what's been going on? Because it sounds absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah, so we've had a series of open days, and a main open day or look-see to see the end results. Of course, it will be in June, when all the blackgrass will be sticking out their heads of wheat, and and really tells the story. The bird's eye view of that, looking at an angle, looking at a drone picture, really does show the outcome. So we have our open day in June, and we will be sending invites out, and it'll be on social media, and all farmers are welcome to come and discuss it with Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie and Greg, for sharing the latest on the Tusmore Farm demonstration site. Do stay tuned here on Tramlines with some great episodes ahead as we hear the latest thoughts on oilseed rape, visit spring barley seed breeding trial sites in Norfolk, and attend Groundswell, the regenerative farming festival. If you have any questions for our experts that you'd like answered, email them into info@agrii.co.uk. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. See you next time.